Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Kylie Turnbull. Today we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, which was fought in the Philippines between combined American and Australian forces and the Imperial Japanese Navy. In the early hours of the 7th of December 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, crippling the US Pacific Fleet and causing a wave of public outrage that saw the US enter the Second World War. After the rapid Japanese invasion and occupation of the Pacific, in 1943 the Allies conducted a series of offensive operations, seizing one island base after another. By mid-1944, Australian and American soldiers, sailors and airmen had fought their way across Papua New Guinea and eastern areas of the Netherlands East Indies. And American General Douglas MacArthur was focused on liberating the Philippines. Every shell, spare part and morsel of food required for this task had to be carried in ships from the US West Coast or Australia. 2/3 of all fresh produce came from Australia. On the morning of the 20th of October 1944, Task Group 78.3 entered Leyte Gulf and began landing operations at Pannon Island. Within 45 minutes, 3 Australian landing ships, HMAS Manura, HMAS Canimbla and HMAS Westralia, had disembarked over 2,800 US troops. The following morning, 2 Australian cruisers were attacked by a Japanese dive bomber, which crashed into the port side of HMAS Australia 2. 30 men were killed or died from their wounds, and 62 were wounded. Australia's captain, Emily Deschanel, was among the dead. Days later, Royal Australian Navy ships were in action in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, considered to be one of the largest naval battles in history. On the 25th of October, the heavy cruiser HMAS Shropshire 8-inch guns engaged the Japanese battleship Yamashiro in the Suryo-Gaya Strait, while the destroyer HMAS Arunta carried out a torpedo attack. The Yamashiro was sunk with the loss of almost its entire crew. While there was still much fighting and suffering to occur before the war would end, the Japanese fleet had ceased to exist. The Allies had won undisputed command of the sea, and Japan was all but cut off from its occupied territories in Southeast Asia. As Admiral Yonai, Japanese Navy Minister, later remarked, "I felt that it was the end." This afternoon, we remember the Battle of Leyte Gulf. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. We're honoured this evening by Her Excellency Mrs. Helen Barber de la Vega, Ambassador of the Philippines, Principal Chaplain Colin Acton on behalf of the Royal Australian Navy, and Mrs. Noni Duranilla, President of the Filipino Communities Council of the ACT. We also warmly welcome Mr. Peter Cook-Russell, representative from the Naval Association ACT section, Mr. Stephen Hutchins, Mornington RSL sub-branch, and Mr. Graham Manning, a veteran of the Malaya Emergency. Also serving men and women from the Southwest Pacific military and police forces. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. And during this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Buckets Way Small Group School, Grahamstown Public School from Raymond Terrace, and WEX 2019 National Group. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events. and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, present!
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every state advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult party, shoulder up. Catapult party, order up.
Students, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli, and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to able seaman Allan Richard Maunsell. Allan Maunsell was born on the 16th of February 1923 in the Sydney suburb of Bankstown, the son of Lewis and Mel Maunsell. Allan's father was a legal officer who worked for the municipality of Bankstown and had served during the First World War. Lewis had been awarded the Military Medal for repairing phone lines under heavy fire at Fleur in 1916. His brother Allan Richard Livingston Maunsell had served in the 3rd Battalion and died of wounds received during the Battle of Poitiers in July 1916 at the age of 21. Young Allan was named in his honour. He grew up in Bankstown and attended school locally. After leaving school, he was employed as an insurance broker's clerk. As the Second World War began, Allan's father again enlisted for service in the army, sailing for service in the Middle East in late 1940. Allan joined the Royal Australian Naval Reserve on the 7th of August 1941 and began full-time duty. His sister Marcia joined the Royal Australian Air Force in April 1943, shortly after her 18th birthday. She would go on to serve in RAAF headquarters in Sydney. Allan Maunsell was sent to HMAS Cerberus for his initial training. By the end of October, he had been noted for good seamanship and had passed his gunnery course with 75.6% accuracy. After completing his training, Maunsell was posted to HMAS Rushcutter in late November. This posting was brief, and on the 22nd of December, he was posted to HMAS Australia, which had recently returned to home waters to become the flagship of the Australian Squadron. 2 months later, Australia became flagship of Anzac Squadron. During March and April 1942, Australia supported US naval forces in the Southwest Pacific in an attempt to stop the southwards expansion of the Japanese. The following month, Maunsell saw his first major action during the Battle of the Coral Sea, where HMAS Australia attacked Japanese transports and light cruisers that were reportedly heading for Port Moresby. On the 21st of June, Maunsell was rated as able seaman radar, and in early July he was posted back to HMAS Rushcutter to attend a radar course. He qualified at the end of August and was posted to the armed merchant cruiser HMAS Australia. For the next month, Maunsell was involved in patrolling the Australian coast. Australia returned to Sydney in late September, and Maunsell was again posted to Australia. In early 1943, Australia was patrolling the east coast of Australia in April and was sent to investigate reports of Japanese landings in the Gulf of Carpentaria, which proved to be negative. From November 1943 to September 1944, Australia was involved in bombarding enemy-held islands in the Southwest Pacific, from Cape Gloucester to Morotai, prior to Allied landings. During this period of time, Maunsell was awarded a Good Conduct Badge. By mid-1944, the Allies were preparing to return to the Philippines. On the 20th of October, American forces landed at Leyte Island in the Philippines. The Japanese fiercely opposed every phase of the American offensive. During the morning of the 21st of October, the cruiser was hit by a Japanese dive bomber. The aircraft crashed into Australia's foremast, causing an explosion and an intense fire on the bridge. There were nearly 100 casualties, with many men suffering terrible burns. Allan Maunsell was among the casualties. The severity of his burns proved mortal, and he died that day. Allan Maunsell was 21 years old. A couple of days later, Maunsell, 30 officers, and other ratings, including Australia's commanding officer, Captain Emile Deschanel, were buried at sea. Allan Maunsell's his name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember able seaman Allan Richard Maunsell, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
have no grave but the cruel sea. No flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Cattle party, return, up.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Cattle party, inwards, turn. Cattle party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys and students, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.